What is up, guys? Welcome back to Sanctify the Saints. Today we are going to be talking about if Jesus Christ was a socialist. There are many people who grossly misrepresent Jesus Christ and the early church he established, as recorded in the book of Acts. People tend to assume that because Jesus taught a high view of charity and sharing one's blessings with the less fortunate, that must mean that he was a socialist. Some even go as far as to say that Jesus taught communism. Three famous proponents of this misunderstanding would be Hugo Chavez, the late Venezuelan president. He stated, "Capitalism is the way of the devil and exploitation. If you really want to look at things through the eyes of Jesus Christ, who I think was the first socialist, only socialism can really create a genuine society." Now let's look at Mikhail Gorbachev, the former Soviet leader. He reads, "Jesus was the first socialist, the first to seek a better life for mankind." And now Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez reads, "Sick and tired of Republicans who co-opt faith as an excuse to advance bigotry and barbarianism. Fact is, if today Christ came to the poor and to the floor of Congress and repeated his teachings, many would malign him as a radical and eject him from the chamber." So, why are these people mislabeling Jesus as being a socialist? Let's get a clear understanding of what socialism is first. Socialism is an economic and political system in which the means of production, distribution, and exchange are collectively owned and regulated by the state or society to promote economic equality and social welfare. It prioritizes wealth distribution, public services, and government intervention to reduce disparities, typically through enforced taxation and regulations rather than voluntarily charity. That's the important kicker here, is voluntary charity. So, as we go on, here's some key passages that people often like to use to argue that Jesus Christ must have been a socialist. From the Gospel of John, chapter 18, verses 22 to 27, it reads, "When Jesus heard this, he said to him, 'One thing you still lack. Sell all that you have and distribute it to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. And come, follow me.' But when he heard these things, he became very sad, for he was extremely rich. Jesus, seeing that he had become sad, said, 'How difficult it is for those who have wealth to enter into the kingdom of God. For it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich person to enter the kingdom of God.' Those who heard it said, 'Then who can be saved?' But he said, 'What is impossible with man is possible with God.'" Another reading from Matthew chapter 20, verses 1 through 16. This is a parable. "For the kingdom of heaven is like a master of a house who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them out into his vineyard. And going out about the third hour, he saw others standing idly by in the marketplace. And to them he said, 'Go into the vineyard too, and whatever is right I will give to you.' So they went. Going out again at the 6th hour and the 9th hour, he did the same. And about the 11th hour, he went out and found others standing. And he said to them, 'Why do you stand here idle all day?' They said to him, 'Because no one has hired us.' He said to them, 'You go into the vineyard too.' And when evening came, the owner of the vineyard came and said to his foreman, 'Call the laborers and pay them for their wages, beginning with the last up to the first.' And when those he hired about the 11th hour came, each of them received a denarius. Now when those hired first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received a denarius. And on, receiving it, they grumbling at the master of the house, saying, These last worked only an hour, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat. But he replied to each one of them, Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last worker as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or do you begrudge my generosity? So the last will be first, and the first last. And the last passage, a lot shorter, from Acts chapter 2, verses 44 and 45. It reads, And all who believed were together and had all things in common, and they were selling their possessions and belongings and distributing the proceeds to all as any had need. Can you catch why they'd believe that Jesus Christ taught first century socialism? It's because he told the rich young ruler to sell all that he had, that he was supposedly lacking one thing, and that one thing was his riches, that he had not given them up to the less fortunate. See, Jesus did this on purpose because it was a test. It was a measure of his actual ability to keep the commandments. If you remember, the rich young ruler claimed he had obeyed all of God's law. But Jesus tells him what he lacks is to sell all of his possessions and give them to the poor and needy. Then the rich young ruler becomes saddened. Why? It says he's sorrowful because he was so rich. But Jesus caught something the rich young ruler couldn't even see in himself. He had placed his wealth above his love for God. Therefore, he had broken one of the most foundational commands of God. Let's turn to Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 4 through 5. It reads, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your might, and with all your strength. With all your soul, and with all your might. The rich young ruler actually didn't love God with his entire being, though. Otherwise, he would not have been saddened. Jesus revealed to him that he actually loved his wealth more than he loved God. And this is why it is difficult for a rich man to enter into heaven. It's because if one isn't careful, greed and selfishness can take hold of a person without them even realizing it. This passage isn't about socialist ethics. Rather, it is about recognizing our own imperfections so that we can rest in the perfection of Jesus Christ by placing our faith and trust in him. The second passage from the Gospel of Matthew, it was a parable of Jesus that showed a master who was willing to hire all of these workers at various hours of the day, and he agreed to pay them each a denarius. It was the master's voluntary decision to pay each of them the same exact wage. I could see why someone might mistake this for socialism, but one detail derails that entire interpretation of the text, and it is the master's will. He was willfully choosing to bless all of his workers equally because of the goodness of his heart. His giving wasn't enforced, it wasn't regulated, and it wasn't coerced by someone else. It was simply his good pleasure to pay the workers what he had agreed to give them. This simply isn't a socialist propaganda verse. Rather, it's a clear indicator of the master's liberty to do as he sees fit with his money. The last passage isn't a quotation from Jesus. Rather, it's a practical example given of how the early church operated following the teachings of Jesus as taught by the apostles in the book of Acts. The Christians were together, selling their possessions voluntarily and giving the proceeds to those in need within their church community. For this to be a form of socialism, the church would have to be forcing this practice, but we don't see that. While the Christian faith for millennia has encouraged giving up one's abundance in order to help those in need, this is taught as a virtue to practice voluntarily, not as a requirement to be a Christian. So instead of socialism, this is an example of voluntary communitarianism, which places a high emphasis on a person's individual liberty to dispense as they see fit. Let's define voluntary communitarianism. It is defined as a social and economic philosophy that emphasizes cooperative, community-based living and mutual aid while preserving individual liberty and private property. Unlike state-enforced collectivism, participation in communal efforts is based on personal choice rather than governmental coercion. This system encourages individuals and groups to voluntarily share their resources, support one another, and work toward a common goal without centralized state control. I'll give one example of a passage that helps support the idea of a more libertarian social ethic rather than socialism. There are tons of scriptures I could pull from, but today we are going to be reading Proverbs chapter 31, verses 16 through 31. She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. She dresses herself with strength and makes her arms strong. She perceives that her merchandise is profitable. Her lamp does not go out at night. She puts her hands to the distaff, and her hands hold the spindle. She opens her hand to the poor and reaches out her hands to the needy. She's not afraid of snow for her household, for all her household are clothed in scarlet, and she makes bed coverings for herself. Her clothing is fine linen and purple. Her husband is known in the gates when he sits among the elders of the land. She makes linen garments and sells them. She delivers sashes to the merchant. Strength and dignity are her clothing, and she laughs at the time to come. She opens her mouth with wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She looks well to the ways of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and call her blessed, her husband also, and he praises her. Many women have done excellently, but you have surpassed them all. Charm is deceitful, and beauty is vain, but a woman who fears the Lord is to be praised. Give her the fruit of her hands, and let her works praise her in the gates. Here we see a godly woman working and toiling in her time to provide for her family, and in the abundance of these provisions, she chooses to voluntarily give to those who are poor and hungry. She makes sure that the needs of her family are met first, and out of her charity and abundance blesses others. I really want to make sure that you understand this. There is nothing wrong with providing for the needs of your family and then finding the kindness and charity in your heart to share with those in need. This is what true godly character looks like. If the woman had gave everything away without consideration to provide for her family, then she would have been an ungodly wife. If she would have provided the needs for her family and hoarded the abundance, she may be considered a greedy and selfish wife. We must endeavor to use God's blessings with wisdom and care, making sure that we are loving to our family and loving towards others. I would challenge anyone to read any of these Bible passages or any others that you're aware of in the scriptures and try to make an argument that Jesus was a socialist, that he taught socialist ideals. I really do not think that anybody can come up with an actual objective argument based on the context of the scriptures. Jesus wanted those who give to give with thanksgiving, to give with charity. This is something that must be developed in a person by the power of God, not forced by an external entity. Therefore, Jesus was by no means a socialist. Thank you guys so much for joining me in this video today. If you guys like this kind of content, please like the video below, subscribe, and there'll be much more to come. But all in all, I just want to thank you guys for supporting the ministry of Sanctify the Saints and supporting me as I try to equip others and serve God. God bless.